In 2014, a woman in Cape Coral named Robin Speroni stopped paying her water bill. She'd installed solar panels, started collecting rainwater, and was living entirely off the grid. A news segment brought code enforcement to her door within days, declaring her home unfit for human habitation. A magistrate split her case in two. Her solar power was legal, her water supply was not. He ordered her sewage line capped until she reconnected to the city system, forcing her onto a wood-style toilet just to get by. That case shows what off-grid retirement in Florida looks like. It's legal, but not simple, and the difference comes down to which side of a county line your property sits on. State law protects your right to add solar panels, but not to disconnect water and sewer, and if a municipal line sits within roughly 200 feet, hooking up isn't optional. Disconnection only works once you're rural enough that no line exists at all. That's the filter for this list. 13 counties where land runs $4,000 to $12,000 an acre. Zoning allows independent living, and no line forces your hand. But the listing price is never the real number. Septic well and solar costs add up fast, and 11 of these 13 counties have no hospital at all. Here are 13 Florida counties where off-grid retirement is still affordable. DeSoto County. DeSoto County sits in the southwest interior, built around the old citrus and cattle town of Arcadia. Land here runs $6,000 to $11,000 an acre, zoned under the county's Agriculture 5 designation, which requires 5 acres minimum before you can build without restriction. The county is comfortable with self-sufficiency. Livestock, agriculture, sustainable construction, all fairly normal here. It even allows a temporary permit for living in an RV during construction, good for about 12 months, as long as the trailer is hooked up to an approved well and septic system. The catch is the wind code. Florida requires structures here to withstand 140 miles per hour, which rules out casual builds like shipping containers unless an engineer signs off on the plans. And the land itself, especially near the Peace River, floods seasonally, which pushes many parcels toward that expensive mounded septic system. Wells here typically reach the upper Floridan aquifer at 120 to 200 feet, producing high-yield water that still needs softening before it's usable in appliances. DeSoto Memorial Hospital exists in Arcadia, but it's small, and it's classified as medically underserved. For anything serious, cardiac care, oncology, you're looking at a 50 to 60 mile drive to Sarasota Memorial or facilities in Fort Myers. In the eastern part of the county, an ambulance can take 25 minutes just to reach you before that drive even starts. Suwannee County takes a different shape entirely, and it starts with what's underneath the ground. Suwannee County. Suwannee sits in north-central Florida, shaped by springs and the kind of karst limestone that makes drilling a well almost effortless. Land runs $5,500 to $9,500 an acre, and the county is genuinely accommodating. Its agricultural zoning permits mobile homes, manufactured homes, and conventional builds with relatively relaxed aesthetic requirements. And you can live in an RV here for up to 2 years while your permanent home gets built, longer than almost anywhere else on this list. Wells here reach the aquifer at just 80 to 150 feet, shallow by Florida standards, though that same porous limestone means contaminants move easily too, so testing your water regularly isn't optional, particularly for agricultural nitrates that can seep down through the karst. The healthcare picture changed here in 2020 when Shands Live Oak lost its inpatient services and became a freestanding emergency room. It can stabilize you. It can't admit you. Anyone needing an actual hospital bed is looking at a drive to Lake City, 30 miles out, or Gainesville, closer to 70. Head north from Suwannee toward the Georgia border, and the land gets even cheaper and even more wooded. Madison County. Madison County borders Georgia, and the land reflects it. Dense, shaded, and some of the cheapest in the state, running $4,000 to $8,000 an acre. There's no minimum square footage on homes here, which means a small cabin or tiny home is entirely legal to build, and the wind code sits at just 115 miles per hour, among the lowest in Florida. The county allows RV camping for up to 180 days a year, with extended permits available once construction actually starts. But the soil splits the county in half. Clay Hill to the north restrict drainage badly, often forcing that mounded septic system, and wells drilled through those same clay layers frequently come back high in iron, requiring specialized filters just to stop staining fixtures. Sandy flatwoods to the south drain fast but sit on a high water table for much of the year. Madison has no acute care hospital, and the county is designated a health professional shortage area. The local Memorial Hospital handles emergencies and outpatient care, but anything serious means a drive of over 55 miles to Tallahassee or Gainesville. In the rural eastern stretch near the town of Lee, that trip to an ICU can stretch past 75 minutes. If Madison feels remote, Hamilton County takes remote and multiplies it. Hamilton County. Hamilton is boxed in by two rivers, the Suwannee and the Withlacoochee, and land here runs $4,000 to $7,500 an acre under the same 5-acre agricultural zoning as its neighbors. The county leans hard into self-sufficiency, and the wind code at 115 miles per hour is cheap to build against. RV living isn't tolerated long-term here, though. Any trailer placed on a construction site has to be hooked up to a permitted well and septic system within 90 days. What isn't cheap is knowing where the water sits. A lot of the affordable land here runs through low river basins that flood in summer, and buying without a topographic survey can mean discovering too late that your parcel is underwater for months at a time. High ground exists, but it costs more, and wells here average 90 to 160 feet, producing water that's abundant but often hard and alkaline because of the shallow limestone underneath. Hamilton has 0 hospitals. There are only 2 practicing physicians for every 10,000 residents in the entire county. A serious medical event here means a transport across the state line to Valdosta, Georgia, or south into Columbia County. Of every county on this list, Hamilton carries some of the thinnest medical coverage anywhere in Florida. Right next door, Lafayette County pushes that isolation even further. Lafayette County. Lafayette is the second least populated county in Florida, home to roughly 8,200 residents spread across mostly pine plantation and cattle land, with acreage running $4,500 to $8,500. The zoning here is friendly to alternative builds, pole barns, and barn dominiums included, and there's no minimum home size in agricultural districts. The ground beneath it is porous limestone, which makes drilling easy. Wells here often reach water at just 70 to 130 feet, but that same porousness means any septic system needs a strict 75-foot buffer from a well to avoid contaminating it. The water itself tends to run high in calcium carbonate, hard enough to damage plumbing and solar water heaters without proper filtration. There are no hospitals in Lafayette County at all, and no emergency department. The nearest partnership hospital in neighboring Taylor County doesn't have emergency receiving capacity at its local clinic. Ground transport to Lake City or Gainesville routinely takes over an hour. This is a county built for people in genuinely good health, not for anyone managing a chronic condition. From Lafayette, the land runs west toward the Gulf into Dixie County, where the ground itself starts working against you. Dixie County. Dixie sits along the northern Gulf Coast, its land shaped by cypress swamp and marsh, running $5,000 to $9,500 an acre. The building department is used to stilt homes and hunting cabins, and RV permits allow up to 180 days of temporary living, though anything left on site longer than 14 days has to be tied into an approved septic system. Because it's coastal, the wind code jumps to 130 or even 140 miles per hour. The bigger issue is underfoot. Dixie's elevation is so low and its water table sits so close to the surface that a standard septic tank is rarely approved at all. Most new construction here requires the mounded system by default, not as an exception. Wells stay shallow, 50 to 110 feet, which keeps drilling costs down, but often means dealing with iron and sulfur in the water. There are no hospitals in Dixie County. Residents travel 50 to 60 miles to Gainesville for anything beyond basic care, and the county has one of the highest rates of preventable hospital stays in the state, a sign of just how little routine care is available locally. Levy County, just to the south, adds a financial twist to that same problem. Levy County. Levy runs from $6,500 to $12,000 an acre, priced up slightly by its access to Gainesville and the Gulf. Limestone from the Ocala Group sits close to the surface across much of the county, which makes septic permitting inconsistent from parcel to parcel. Sandy ground near Bronson tends to drain well and pass a perc test without much trouble, but other areas carry heavy clay or shallow limestone that blocks proper effluent filtration, and in those spots, the health department mandates the mounded system regardless of what the land costs. Levy is stricter than most of its neighbors on RVs, living in 1 on a vacant lot is flatly illegal, and even temporary occupancy during construction requires a posted bond, an active building permit, and a fully operational health department approved septic system already in place. Wells here run 100 to 170 feet, and the water is generally high yield, but the same limestone that makes drilling easy also makes the water extremely hard, requiring a dedicated softener to keep scale from building up in solar water heaters and standard plumbing alike. The hospital story here is the starkest on the list. Levy's only hospital in Williston collapsed financially in 2019 and shut down for good. The building still sits empty, eventually cycling through tax deed sales with no active bidders. Today, a resident having a medical emergency faces a 3-hour ambulance round trip to Gainesville or Ocala, and the ambulance itself isn't cheap. Levy County's rates start with a base fee that can run up to $961, plus over $14 a mile for the first stretch of the trip, dropping slightly for distances beyond 17 miles. A transport from Williston to Gainesville, roughly 21 miles, can add more than $200 in mileage fees alone. On top of that base charge, a bill that standard Medicare or private coverage may not fully absorb. Just west, Gilchrist County offers cleaner water and the exact same hospital problem. Gilchrist County. Gilchrist calls itself the Springs capital of the world, and the geology backs that up. Land runs $6,000 to $11,500 an acre, and wells here tap into the aquifer reliably at 90 to 150 feet, producing some of the cleanest water on this list. Generally excellent, but hard enough to need basic mechanical filtration and softening. That same water sensitivity, though, means septic systems face rigid setbacks from sinkholes in the Santa Fe River, and engineered mounded systems are frequently required for any parcel near the river itself, since the deep, permeable sand that makes a perc test easy to pass also lets wastewater migrate quickly into the aquifer below. RV rules are tight too. Camping tops out at 14 days, and anything longer has to be tied to an active home building permit with approved septic and well connections already established, a policy the county maintains specifically to prevent unregulated RV parks from forming on agricultural land. Gilchrist has no hospital, and the entire county is officially designated as both a health professional shortage area and a medically underserved area. Its rate of preventable hospital stays runs close to 3,700 per 100,000 residents, another marker of how little day-to-day medical infrastructure exists here despite the abundant natural water resources. A real emergency means a 35 to 45 mile drive east to Gainesville, which can eat up nearly an hour, depending on where in the county you're starting from, exposing residents to real delay during exactly the kind of event where minutes matter most. Step back from these last few counties and a shape starts to appear. The panhandle counties on this list tend to run cheapest and loosest on regulation, but fight clay soil and deep limestone. The north central cluster, Suwannee through Gilchrist, sells the easiest water access in the state, sitting on karst limestone that makes drilling simple, but that same cluster is the epicenter of Florida's rural hospital losses. Further south, DeSoto, Glades, and Hendry flip that trade again, charging a premium for land while adding stricter wind codes and wetter soil that almost always demands the expensive mounded septic system. Taylor County breaks the north-central pattern, and it's worth paying attention to why. Taylor County. Taylor sits along Florida's Big Bend, dominated by commercial timberland and known locally for hunting camps and off-grid cabins, with acreage priced between $4,500 and $9,000. Its coastal exposure pushes the wind code up to 130 or 140 miles per hour, and every structure has to be engineered to withstand those hurricane-force winds, which raises permitting and material costs above what an inland panhandle county would require. RV placement is allowed for up to 180 days a year under a permit in the agricultural districts, but the county strictly prohibits using an RV as a primary permanent residence beyond that window. The topography here is exceptionally flat, wet pine flatwoods and coastal swamp for long stretches, and the soil is frequently saturated with a seasonal water table sitting near the surface across much of the county. That combination makes passing a standard perc test difficult almost everywhere, and the Department of Health nearly universally mandates the engineered mounded system for both inland and coastal parcels alike. Wells run 110 to 180 feet, and the water often carries organic compounds, iron, and sulfur that need comprehensive treatment systems before it's safe and pleasant to drink. But Taylor has something most of this list doesn't: an actual hospital. Doctors Memorial in Perry is a small 48-bed critical access facility running emergency care around the clock, along with basic diagnostics and outpatient lab services. It's genuinely valuable for stabilizing a local emergency, but it lacks advanced tertiary capability: no cardiac catheterization lab, no dedicated oncology unit, no neurosurgery suite. Patients needing that level of care are stabilized in Perry first, then transferred 55 miles north to Tallahassee Memorial. Still, having any local hospital at all puts Taylor ahead of most of the counties we've covered so far. Putnam County. Putnam in northeast Florida is full of cheap pre-platted lots in older subdivisions like Interlachen and Satsuma, some going for under $10,000 for a quarter acre. It sounds like the best deal on this entire list. It usually isn't. Most of those lots sit in restrictive residential zoning, often classified R2, that bans mobile homes, tiny homes, and RV living outright, even for a single night on the property while building. The real problem is physical. Florida law requires 75 feet of separation between a well and a septic drain field. A lot that's only 75 feet wide can't legally fit both, no matter how the structure is arranged on the parcel. That leaves two options: buy several adjoining quarter-acre lots to get the width needed, or connect to public utilities instead, which defeats the purpose of going off-grid in the first place. True off-grid freedom in Putnam means buying into the agricultural zones instead, where minimum parcels run 5 to 10 acres and prices climb accordingly. Wells in these agricultural zones average 120 to 200 feet into the Floridan aquifer, yielding high volumes of hard, calcium-rich water. Putnam does have a working hospital, HCA Florida Putnam in Palatka, offering real emergency and surgical care along with basic diagnostic imaging. Residents near town get response times as low as 20 minutes. Out in Interlachen, 25 to 30 miles from Palatka, that number stretches, but at least the option exists close by. For anything Putnam's hospital can't handle, residents are ultimately referred on to larger medical centers in Gainesville or Jacksonville, both within a reasonable drive from most of the county's rural subdivisions. South of here, in Glades County, the hospital option disappears entirely again. Glades County. Glades sits on the southwest shore of Lake Okeechobee, sugarcane and cattle country, with land running $5,500 to $10,500 an acre under a zoning rule that requires 5 to 10 acres minimum. The county's rural agricultural zones carry very few restrictions on sustainable farming, composting, or large-scale solar arrays, which makes it attractive on paper for anyone planning to live self-sufficiently. But hurricane exposure pushes the wind code to 140 miles per hour, and every residential structure has to clear an expensive engineering review before a permit gets issued. The region's history as a floodplain means the soil is often organic muck over clay, ground that almost universally fails a standard perc test. Mounded septic systems are close to unavoidable here, and wells drilled to 150 to 250 feet still tend to come back notoriously high in iron and tannins, requiring advanced multi-stage filtration just to make the water usable. Glades has 0 hospitals and only 1 practicing physician for every 10,000 residents, among the lowest ratios of any county on this list. There are no pediatricians, no obstetricians, no internal medicine specialists anywhere in the county. Emergency transport runs 30 to 45 miles to Okeechobee or into Highlands County, and anything requiring specialized trauma care or advanced cardiac intervention means an airlift to Fort Myers or West Palm Beach, since ground transport at that distance simply takes too long. Just south, Hendry County has a hospital, but it comes with its own kind of gap. Hendry County. Hendry sits south of Glades, anchored by LaBelle and Clewiston, in a landscape that still carries the imprint of the historic Everglades drainage basin. Land here runs $6,000 to $11,000 an acre under the same 140 mile/hour wind code as its neighbors, which requires wind-braced framing and impact-resistant materials on every new build. RV living here is tightly restricted, allowed only during active home construction under an open permit, with code enforcement actively watching for unpermitted campers on vacant land. land. The soil is a mix of fine sand and alkaline clay, and the flat terrain drains slowly enough that gravity-fed septic systems are difficult to get approved at all. The health department routinely mandates the mounded design for new rural construction instead. Wells reach 130 to 220 feet, and the groundwater carries enough sulfur and iron that oxidation and filtration systems are close to mandatory before the water is usable. Hendry Regional Medical Center in Clewiston is real, a small 25-bed facility offering emergency care and basic admissions, but it closed its obstetrics unit due to low reimbursement and staffing shortages, making Hendry an officially designated maternity care desert. Anyone needing to deliver a baby here drives over 50 minutes to Fort Myers, and for advanced tertiary care beyond what the local hospital can handle, the same 45-mile trip west applies. For a retiree without that concern, Hendry's local hospital still puts it ahead of much of this list. The final county on our list sits far from all of these, tucked into the Panhandle, and it may be the strongest all-around pick of the 13. Jackson County. Jackson County in the rolling hills of Northwest Florida offers some of the most affordable and diverse land on this entire list, $4,000 to $8,500 an acre, especially in unincorporated areas like Alford and Greenwood. The zoning is relaxed. Mobile homes, tiny homes, and unconventional builds are all permitted with few restrictions, and the wind code sits at a manageable 120 miles per hour, well below what coastal counties require. RV living is allowed for up to 180 days, with extensions available for anyone actively building under an open permit. The ground splits the way it does in Madison. Clay hills to the north complicate septic permitting, often forcing an oversized or mounded drain field design, while sandy soil to the south drains well but carries its own risk in the form of sinkholes from the karst limestone underneath. Wells here run 100 to 180 feet and generally produce good water, needing only basic filtration for calcium hardness and occasional iron deposits. Jackson Hospital in Mariana provides real acute care, emergency services, and basic surgical capability. Residents in the far northern part of the county, near Alford, face response times up to 35 minutes, but anyone needing advanced trauma or cardiac care is stabilized locally first before being transferred onto larger medical centers in Tallahassee or Pensacola, rather than facing that longer trip without any local care first. Combined with the low land cost and lenient building rules, Jackson closes this list as one of the few counties that doesn't ask you to choose between affordability and access to real medical care. Line all 13 of these counties up next to each other, and a pattern falls out on its own. The cheapest, most permissive land in Florida sits almost entirely in the same region as its emptiest hospital networks. 11 counties on this list have no hospital at all. Only Taylor, Putnam, Jackson, and Hendry in a limited way have one nearby. That's not an argument against off-grid retirement in Florida. There are real financial incentives built into the system for the people willing to do this properly. Land classified as agricultural under Florida's Greenbelt law gets taxed on its farming value instead of its development potential, which is why buying 5 or 10 acres and actually working the land, timber, cattle, or crops can cut a property tax bill significantly compared to a standard residential parcel. Solar equipment gets its own break too. The added value it brings to a home is fully exempt from property tax, and the equipment itself is exempt from sales tax when purchased. Neither exemption offsets a failed perc test or a missing hospital, but both make the ongoing cost of doing this correctly a little more manageable. Notice too that the counties without a hospital aren't necessarily the ones with the worst land. Hamilton and Lafayette both offer easy drilling and low wind codes, the kind of numbers that look great on paper. It's only when you line up the medical column next to them that the calculation changes. The reverse is also true. Jackson and Taylor aren't the cheapest counties on this list, but they're the only two that let a retiree build affordably without giving up a functioning hospital nearby. That pairing, low cost, and real medical access only shows up twice in 13 counties, which says something about how rare that particular balance actually is in rural Florida. If there's a workable order of operations buried in all of this, it starts before the land is even under contract. Get the soil profile and PRX test done first, with the result written into the purchase contract as a contingency, not treated as a formality after closing. Skip the sub-acre subdivision lots entirely, no matter how cheap they look, since the well-to-septic buffer alone makes most of them legally unbuildable off-grid. Target agricultural or rural residential zoning at 5 to 10 acres instead, which clears the tax exemption threshold and gives enough room for a well and drain field to coexist. Size the solar inverter around the 10 kilowatt insurance threshold rather than around convenience. And before signing anything, map the actual drive time to the nearest hospital with inpatient beds, because that number won't show up in the listing, and it's the one figure on this whole list that doesn't come with a workaround. None of these 13 counties hands a retiree the whole package on its own. The cheapest land clusters around the emptiest medical networks, and the counties with real hospitals nearby, Taylor, Putnam, Jackson, ask for either a slightly higher price per acre or a stricter set of building rules in exchange. That trade-off is the actual finding here, not a footnote to it. The county that saves the most money on land is rarely the same county that keeps you safest if something goes wrong. Anyone weighing this decision has to decide which of those two numbers matters more, and decide it before the closing date, not after.